there was a group of bus drivers. They went to their employer asking for a pay rise. They got told to shove it, and they were quickly replaced with bus drivers from Eastern Europe who would do the job for the minimum wage that they were offering. Do you know what I mean? So you notice that, and obviously you think about all these different people who are going to interact with these bus drivers and what negative opinions they're going to have. It's just not good for society. So I was always on the page of, which is not very in the Labour Party at the time, I was always on the page of, we need to lower immigration because it needs to be more reasonable. And then sure enough, this question time debate happened. And Nigel Farage said something. He said, you cannot lower immigration to the levels that you require while we are in the EU, right? And now I wasn't clever enough at the time to understand how that worked from a policy perspective. I'd never looked into it. But I was intuitive enough to realize the responses from the people on the panel knew that he was right. And so what I did was I spent an entire night researching the EU. I went down the rabbit hole, and the next day I woke up as a Brexiteer. And I was quickly persona non grata within the Labour movement. They hated me for it, and a number of other people got it in the neck as well. We went through the election, obviously the year before. So now it was Corbyn. Corbyn was in play. I voted for Jeremy Corbyn in 2017, I'm ashamed to say. And by 2018...
I said that he was a good man on Twitter, and I still hate myself for saying that.
Yeah. I didn't know. Again, I was naive. I was stupid. I want to say I was young, but whatever. I was naive, and I went through the whole Brexit debate. I was thrilled that we left the European. Well, we voted to leave anyway, the European Union. Yeah. And again, I had people calling me worse than scum. These are like people within the Labour Party, the people within the Labour movement who I was friends with.
Yeah, because people don't understand that Labour Party and most of the Labour Party members and stuff, not most of the members, but most of the activists that they have now and their MPs and stuff, they are the new elites, right? So the things. This is why they don't connect with the working class, because they don't understand the problems of the working class. They don't understand how their policies are actually affecting them. Like you said, is the labor, just changing the whole labor of that area, and putting the working class in disadvantage. But it doesn't affect them. They're not those people are not coming into their areas where they live. They're not affecting their white collar jobs and stuff like that. So it doesn't affect them as much.
And
they can still be the higher management and stuff, which the jobs that they usually get.
And that disconnect continued. But I did remain within the Labour movement as a little bit of an outsider with a few others. But then obviously we started hearing about the anti-Semitism and the real issue. Now, I'll be honest with you, I witnessed some crazy stuff within the Labour youth movement anyway that was just out there, right? But, that was just par for the course. You kind of got on with it. But when it came to people literally coming up to you and asking, like, can I get this dealt with and stuff, and the party just going silent, I was very disturbed by it. And what happened in the end was essentially it was in 2018. This was, I was talking to a friend of mine. Now I've always been a massive fan of George Orwell. One of my favourite books of all time is Animal Farm, and you can see why when I tell the rest of the story. But obviously another one of his classics is 1984. And I was talking to a woman who I've been friends with 7 years at this point. We were very close as friends. And Guido Fawkes, the right-wing media outlet, they posted a tweet, or maybe it was a Facebook post, I can't remember, but social media post out, and it was the video of Jeremy Corbyn calling Hamas and Hezbollah his friends, right? And I showed her this video. And at this point, I wasn't really involved as much anymore. I kind of got a distance from it because I wasn't welcome, and my views were kind of very, very. I'd looked into it philosophically. I realised I was blue Labour, and that was just not the party anymore. And I showed her this video, and her response was, "It's a Guido Fawkes. That's a right wing smear."
Yeah,
and I said no, but
ignoring the message. Ignoring the message.
And I said no, but the video the video is Jeremy Corbyn saying this, and she
Mm.
said it again. And just that quote came to me, the party told you to reject the
Yeah,
evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final,
exactly.
most essential command. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, I am living in a George
Hmm.
Orwellian world here. I couldn't believe it. And it was in that moment I just said, and I was thinking about it for a while, I'm not going to lie,
Mm.
but I was like, I'm leaving. And that was it.
Yeah.
And I left, and I didn't look back. And it's hard, by the way, to leave political parties. It's hard to leave any group, but
Yeah.
I find it particularly hard because they just cut you off. Even the people who you're supposedly friends with, that network, you just disappears. You get left
Mm.
behind. And sometimes you get attacked, right? And
Oh
it
yeah.
is very difficult. But I did feel free getting away from it. You don't realize how much it burdens you. I was just going to say, do you know when you're running on a treadmill and
Hmm.
you get off the treadmill and you feel light and floaty, because obviously your body's calming down.
Yeah.
You don't actually realize when you're on the treadmill how much stress you're putting your body through. And I say
Mm.
the same thing about when you get involved in activism and stuff like that. Until you actually stop, the stress is
Yeah.
relieved from you. You don't realize how stressed you actually are, how unhappy you are until you get
Mm.
out of it. And then I was like, wow. Even though they were giving me, some of them were giving me a bit of abuse for things I'd said and things I'd done, and leaving them and quitting them and being a traitor, all the rest of it. It was just a breather, and I just said I'm done with politics. I'm absolutely done with it.
Yeah.
I'm never going back into it. And I was just, that was it. And I think the reason why it stopped quite quickly and they didn't follow me around, I guess, is because online, is because I didn't jump into another party. I just said I was
Yeah.
done, and that
Yeah.
was it. I was gone. And then obviously the incident with Twitter happened, where, as I said,
Mm.
I got doxxed, and I just said I'm done with that as well, and I just
Mm.
switched off from everything. It was an amazing, weird change in life. But I then went through COVID. I acquired a bit of a medical condition, which I'm chronic health condition I'm long term dealing with,
Mm.
and in these things change your life, right? And so
Yeah.
all of a sudden priorities shift. And I just remember, I think, I want to say it was during lockdown. I can't remember, it must have been 2020-ish. But anyway, I was bored, lost,
Mm.
angry, feeling despair about the way in which, because obviously COVID opened a lot of people's eyes to how poorly we were being treated as a country and all the rest of it. And I stumbled across a book. The book was called Despised: Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class by Paul Embry.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I just went, wow, this book is literally describing the experiences I had been through.
Mm.
All the thoughts that I had in my subconscious, that they aren't really left wing. They aren't actually for the working class at all. But they say
Yeah.
they are, so I keep believing they are, but they're not. And Paul, as much as I really respect the guy and I rate him entirely, has stayed in the Labour Party, I guess in the dream that one day it could be changed. I
Yeah.
just realised it couldn't, and it was done.
Yeah.
And there's too many crazy woke Marxist types in there who, like Jordan Peterson says, don't focus on changing the world, focus on tidying your room.
No, but
Those people
this is the
dominate that party
problem.
now.
This is the problem with labor, right? So I think so. It has always been the problem with labor, with being linked to Marxism, right? So people try to dress it up. You can dress it up as much as you want, but I think so it's a bad coding problem. Like Marxism is a bad coding problem, and no matter what iteration you have of it down the line, is going to create bad outcomes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And eventually what happened with labor was as well that they didn't just have Marxism. They thought, let's include Islamism as well
Mm-hmm.
in our midst, and that's where the anti-Semitism went through the roof. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think so. Labor has that problem, and just like Tories that need to be destroyed for the country to be saved, Labor also need to be destroyed for
Mm-hmm.
the country's basically the soul to be recaptured.
Yeah. And I just felt that, like I say, I just thought they were too grand for what was required to
Hmm.
fix the country. They were interested in fixing the world and not in fixing our streets. And
Mm-hmm.
I just got very disillusioned with it all. And I was very angry at the country at the time. And I wanted to get back in touch with politics, but I didn't know how, because there was no party that just seemed to resonate with and get the problem. Do you know what I mean? If I wanted to just do an anti-immigration thing, I could have voted Brexit party or something, and
Yeah.
but I didn't, and I did, I thought about all these different things I could have get involved with, but I didn't. I stayed away from them, and then I was just watching one of my favorite YouTube shows, Trigonometry, and
Mm.
a guy came on there called William Clouston, and
Yeah.
he spoke. It was one of the best talks I'd ever witnessed in my life. Honestly, it was like you just found someone who was talking to me, and he was
Yeah.
explaining things in ways that politicians avoid now. It wasn't in
Mm.
sound bites. It was in clear understanding of, this isn't an easy fix. We've had
Yeah.
decades and decades of mass globalized neoliberalism, and
Mm.
it's ruined our society. And he went through the idea that, we should be building, you know, policies around family first, not
Mm.
individualism, not selfishness. We
Yeah.
should be building policies around communities. And that's what spoke
Mhm.
to me. I listen to my nana and granddad, and they'll talk to me about how they know every person on the street. They've got stories about how, growing up and living in their communities, they knew every single person. And most people nowadays would be lucky if they knew the names of both next door neighbours. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And I just realised that we have a complete arrogance that we as a society think for the first time in human history we can change our stars, when we're actually more chained to our biology than we think. We're just
Yeah.
impressive monkeys. We're nothing special in that regard. We
Mm.
have to be grounded by the reality of our situation and accept that we are limited in some ways, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Acknowledging our limitations, acknowledging what the limitations we can break down, but also being proud of the fact that we understand ourselves better than other animals do, for example. And so
Mm.
when I listened back to stories of I'm obsessed with my, family history and stuff. And
Mhm.
you listen back to it and you think about how all these people lived. And I just think, are we doing this right? Are we? Are we really meant to
Mm.
just, I mean, I remember in the Brexit, referendum and the debate. And the Brexit referendum, for those who forget, was actually quite, other than Joe Cox's horrendous murder, which I don't
Mm.
think was actually related to. I don't think I could
No.
pin that as part of the campaign. But what I'm saying is that other than that one horrific incident, the actual campaign itself was relatively timid, especially
Mm.
compared to what happened afterwards. Afterwards was an absolute disaster in terms of how a country speaks to each other. And you realise just how much loathing certain people had
Mhm.
for working class people in general, or especially the ones who voted the wrong way, as they would see it. But what I realised when I was talking to these liberal Remainer types, who are middle class and so on, the kind of person, very
Yeah.
much the James O'Briens of the world.
Mhm.
You'd speak to them about your home, and you'd realise that quite quickly they were talking about the literal four walls that surround them when they sleep at night. When I talk about
Yeah.
home, I talk about
Yeah.
not even where I live now. I talk about where I grew up, the community I grew up in, the people who formed part of your existence, the
Mhm.
people you interacted with, the corners, the curves, the streets, the housing, everything about that location was my
Yeah.
home. I still get excited when I go home now, and I don't even live there right now. My home is my community where I grew up. And when you realize there's that such disconnect between how certain people see the world and others see the world, you realize that we're actually talking across from each other in a lot of the respects from this. And it was the first time I'd ever heard that encapsulated into party policy, and it was with William Clouston in the SDP.